Okay. Today
So
there is a lot of problem regarding this C waiting room, and I think the screen just stuck up. You have to frequently remove that thing, C waiting room.
yes, you will have to do that as a co-host. You will keep getting that. But now we are ready. We are live on Facebook. Recording is also on. So, President sir, we can start.
Thank you, Rahul. On behalf of VIP Road Chartered Accountant Association, myself, C.A. Rajesh Singhania, welcome all the participants. I have the pleasure to welcome our honorable speaker, C.A. Manoj Bhatia. He is a company secretary also, and he is a very good consultant in Calcutta. I have heard him first time probably in the year 1994 when I went for my SMTP classes, and since then I am his fan. And today we are here to on the related party transactions, which are covered by the definition is covered by section 2, subsection 76. And then there is a the accounting standards also in AS 24 and AS 18. And in addition, clause 49 of the listing agreement also is hit by that. Sir, it is my pleasure to welcome you on behalf of VIP Road Chartered Accountant Association. Now I just do not need any introduction. I just hand over the proceedings to CA Vishnu Kumar Tulsian. He will just briefly introduce, then we will enjoy your session. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, President. And when I asked Manoj Bhaiya to please share his profile, he told me simply बोलो कि CS हैं. हम बोले ऐसे तो नहीं चलेगा, कुछ तो बोलना पड़ेगा. And thank you, sir. Thanks for accepting our invitation. Friends, with the growing participation of investors and other shareholders in the companies, the question of transparency in arrangement with related party has often been a topic of much debate and discussion. Considering the wide coverage of RPT in the Company Act and SEBI LODR, I invite and welcome Mr. Bhatia ji. And I am formally introducing very shortly. Mr. Manoj Bhatia need not introduction. First of all, in spite of that, I am duty bound to introduce him. He is the managing partner of MK Bin Associates, practicing company secretary. He has been the experience of practicing in the field of corporate laws for around 30 years. He is the secretarial auditor of numerous reputed listed companies and has also been engaged in a retainer for providing consultancy services to them on various matters related to corporate laws and allied laws. He is a trainer, he is a speaker, and is a speaker on corporate laws, corporate restructurings, and many other subjects. He is also trained to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs officers and CAGA. One thing from my side is my experience that he is very humble and down-to-earth personality and have very much interested in music and songs also, be it Hindi or be it Marwari. Now, without wasting time, now hand over the proceeding to Manoj Bhatia ji for his deliberation to our audience. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishnu, and I think I am audible to everyone.
Sure, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Rajesh, for welcoming me, and it's really a pleasure to see you all after almost 60 days of lockdown, and then to see that we all have been staying indoors and have been trying to build up capacities so as to enable us to work from home. And this changed makeover that I have is primarily thanks to lockdown, and it is you don't have to infer anything more than that, and do not really have to think beyond that. It's purely because of the lethargy that one has during the lockdown period and nothing else. Related party transactions, the topic that I'll be speaking on today. I think I'll be requiring, if the organizers permit, the time that I would take would be roughly between 1.5 hours to 2 hours, and I think that's the permitted time that I have. And
yes, sir.
I can decipher the topic into two parts. One is the compliance part, and the second is the disclosure part. Now, when I talk of compliance part, I am talking about compliance part as prescribed for all the companies under the Companies Act and for listed companies in accordance with the listing regulations, LODR provisions as well. And when I'm talking of disclosure requirements, I am not talking about those disclosure requirements which a company has to make in its board's report pursuant to related party transactions. When I'm talking of disclosure requirements, I'm talking of disclosure requirements which a company has to give in relation to related party transactions in its financial statements in accordance with the relevant accounting standards. What you see as related party transactions in the financial statements is pursuant to accounting standards. Those disclosures are guided by accounting standards. I will not be talking about disclosures as are required to be given in financial statements. The subject matter of today's discussion is not about how will you disclose related party transactions in the financial statements of a company in accordance with accounting standards. The subject matter of my discussion today is how will you comply with related party transactions in accordance with the provisions of the Companies Act? And if you happen to be a listed company, then also in accordance with the listing regulations. And all those disclosures that you are required to make in the director's report or in any other report that you submit to the stock exchanges pursuant to LODR or pursuant to the Companies Act. So we are not talking about disclosure in financial statements. Let us be very, very clear. We are only talking about compliances relating to related party transactions, either under the Companies Act or under the LODR. Now, I always maintain that related party transaction is a very, very complex web. And one has to be very clear in his mind to really understand what a related party transaction is and what compliance one needs to do in respect of a particular related party transaction. Now, to understand a related party, to understand what compliances you need to do with respect to a related party transaction, you first need to know who is a related party, what are related party transactions, what is the status of a particular entity to which you are applying compliance of related party transaction provisions. Having understood who a related party is, what the transaction is, what is the status of the entity, then you finally zero in down to what compliances you have to make with respect to that particular related party transaction that you have entered with a particular related party. And then finally, if you are entering into, if you are aware of what compliances you have to make, and if you have entered into certain related party transactions, then finally, with respect to those transactions, what disclosures you are required to give to the stock exchanges, or what disclosures you are required to make in your director's report with respect to those related party transactions. This will be the subject matter of my discussion today. And we will try and cover almost every aspect of related party transactions and compliances in relation thereto. Now, as I said, as I already told you, that for entering into a related party transaction, it is first important that the transaction has to be with a related party. And then you have to be very, very sure that the particular entity with whom you have entered into a transaction is your related party. An entity which is your related party in accordance with section 2 subsection 76 of the Companies Act may not be your related party in accordance with accountants in the 24 or accounting standard 18. Today, even under the IBC, you have a definition of related parties, though that's not relevant for our discussion. But all that I want to highlight is that related parties are defined in different manner at different places. The Companies Act has a particular definition. Accounting Standard 18 has one particular definition. At Ind AS 24 gives different related party relationships. And then finally, even IBC has a special definition, a different definition of who or what a related party is. So it's very important to understand who is the related party. Similarly, not every related party transaction in respect of every company is subject to compliance. In some cases, it is only certain specific related party transactions which are subject to compliances. Even if those specific transactions under certain circumstances, even in respect of them, there may not be any compliance that is required to be made. And in case of certain companies, it is not specific transactions, but all the transactions that you enter into with related parties that are required, that are subject to compliance. So you really need to understand whether a particular transaction that you are entering into actually needs any compliance, whether at all it is a related party transaction or not. Then depending on your status, whether you are a private company, public company, listed public company with certain specified percentage capital strength, certain specified borrowings, whether you are any specific type of a company, whether compliance provisions would differ, because compliance provisions differ from the nature of the entity. Different entities will have different levels of compliance that they are required to do. And then having finalized these three, then we finally come to which particular legal provision will be applicable in a particular given case, having understood who the related party is and what related party transactions are and what is the status of that. So let us start by understanding who is a related party. As you can see, section 2, subsection 76 of the Companies Act defines a related party. There is a definition of related party even under the SEBI listed obligations and disclosure requirement regulations. Accounting Standard 18, para 3 defines different types of related party relationships. Ind AS 24 also has a very specific definition of related party. Section 5, subsection 24 of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code also defines a related party. I must very clearly say that the definition of related party under section 5, subsection 24 of IBC code is not relevant for our discussion. I am only trying to highlight the fact that related parties have been defined in a different manner under different statute. For the purposes of our discussion, the definition given under section 5, subsection 24 of IBC is not relevant. I will tell you what it is, but I will not dwell upon it to a great length. So let us first understand how a related party is defined under the Companies Act. I am sure you all must be knowing by rote as to what is the definition of a related party. Even at the cost of repetition, let me take you through this definition in my own way. Now, section 2, subsection 76 defines a related party to mean a director or his relative, irrespective of the status of the director, whether he is a managing director, whether he is a whole-time director, whether he is a non-executive director, whether he is an independent director, irrespective of his status, every director is a related party to a company. And his relatives. All the relatives of your directors are also related party to a particular reporting entity. A key managerial personnel or his relative. Now, key managerial personnel under the Companies Act has a very specific definition. It includes managing director and CEO, whole-time director, CFO, company secretaries, and such other KMPs as may be prescribed. So all those KMPs and their relatives are also related parties as far as section 2 subsection 76 of the Companies Act. A firm in which the director or relative is a partner. I am ignoring the term manager because it's not relevant for our discussions. Very, very few companies in the country has have appointed managers. So I'm not going to discuss about managers in detail. A firm in which a director or his relative is a partner. Any partnership firm in which the director of the reporting entity or his relative, if he happens to be a partner, then that partnership firm is also your related party. Now, interestingly, the terminology used is firm. Firm refers to a partnership firm as defined under the Indian Partnership Act. The immediate question that comes to one's mind is, what is the status of a limited liability partnership? A limited liability partnership is not a firm under the Indian Partnership Act. On the other hand, it has been defined as a body corporate. The statute itself defines it as a body corporate. So LLP does not come under this particular provision, which says a firm in which director or relative is a partner. So if the director of the reporting entity or the relative of that particular director happens to be a partner in any partnership firm, then that partnership firm is your related party. Similarly, a private company in which the director or his relative is a member or director. I hope you are able to see the wide canvas when they are defining related parties. Every private limited company in which the director of the reporting entity or any of his relative, if he happens to be either a director or a member, irrespective of the number of shares that he holds, even that every such private limited company would be a related party. Not director being a director or member. Even if his relative is either a director or a member in a private limited company, then such private limited company also becomes your related party. If the reporting entity is XYZ Limited, and if XYZ Limited has 6 directors, those 6 directors have at least 5 relatives each, which means 30 of them. All those private limited companies where these 30 people are either directors or shareholders, I mean, if a person can be a director in 15 companies, and if all these 6 of them happens to be directors in 15 companies, the maximum number of companies that they can go up to is 90. And if you look at their relatives, 20 more of them, which means 300. And if they are members in any other private limited company, that could be any number of private limited companies in which they may be holding even a single share, all those private limited companies are your related party. It is going to be every company secretary's and every chartered accountant's nightmare to compile this entire list of directors, list of their relatives, all those private limited companies where these directors and relatives are either directors or members. It's really, really going to be a Herculean task. It's not impossible, but you really, really have to struggle very hard, be very, very persuasive with all the directors before you can finally compile this list and be sure that you have mapped every such private limited company, and you will be in a position to know as and when a transaction is entered by your company with any of these mapped entities, you will know that yes, it's a related party transaction that's happening. A public company in which the director or manager is a director and holds along with his relatives more than 2% of its paid up capital. Now it's a dual qualification that needs to be satisfied. The director of the reporting entity should be a director of a public company, and then along with his relatives, he should be holding more than 2% share capital of that public limited company. Only then such public limited company will become your related party. So directorship as well as holding of 2% share capital of the public company, this holding can be along with relatives. Only then you will know that that other public company is your relative. Any body corporate whose board of directors, managing director or manager is accustomed to act in accordance with the advice, directions or instructions of a director or manager of the reporting entity. This clause appears to be very, very simple, but practically it is one of the most difficult clauses to implement. Suppose company A enters into a related party transaction with company B. And in company A, there are 3 directors. And in company B, there are 3 directors. And all the 3 directors are common. Can we say that company B is acting as per the instructions, directions, or advice of company A? Where the whole of the board is common, or the majority of the board is common, generally the presumption is that the other company is acting as per the instructions, directions, or advice of the board or directors of the reporting entity. Generally, I won't say it is conclusive, but yes, generally the presumption is that the board of one particular company is acting as per the instructions, directions, or advice of the board of the other. Similarly, where say company A Limited enters into a transaction with company B Limited, and the employees of company A Limited happens to be directors of company B Limited. I'm not saying a fairy tale here. These are all real life examples which you see on your daily basis when you do audits of companies, or when you as company secretaries encounter compliances in respect of RPTs in respect of these companies. It is very, very common that the employees of a particular company happen to be directors of the other company with whom you enter into transaction. The presumption is that since employees of one particular company happen to be on the board of the other company with whom you are entering into transaction, one particular company is acting as per the instructions, directions, or advice of the other company, and hence they are RPTs, related parties. This is purely on the basis of the facts of every given case. But then, as I told you, it's very, very difficult. It is very, very objective. It's only on the basis of a particular specific case that you have to decide whether any body corporate can be said to be accustomed to act in accordance with the advice, directions, or instructions of a director of the other body corporate. Any person on whose advice, directions, or instructions a director or manager is accustomed to act. Now, the Companies Act defines the term promoter. The term promoter is defined in the Companies Act to mean a person on whose advice, directions, or instructions a director or manager is accustomed to act. Now, there are 3 limbs to this particular definition. One is all those people who are named in all the documents that you file with the registrar of companies as promoters, they are taken, or in offer documents as promoters, they are taken as promoters. But then there is another limb of the definition which says any person on whose advice, directions, or instruction a director or manager is accustomed to act. So such person is also defined as a promoter. So a promoter is also your related party. Then if you are acting, if the board of this particular company is acting as per the instructions, as per his advice, or as per his instructions. Any company which is a holding company, subsidiary company, or an associate company, or a fellow subsidiary. So your holding company is your related party, your subsidiary is your related party, your associate is your related party, your fellow subsidiary is your related party. Now, an associate has been defined to mean a company in which you have significant influence. And mathematically, this significant influence is measured in by holding of at least 20% voting rights of that particular entity. So if you are having control over 20% or more of the voting rights of a particular entity, then that particular entity is said to be your associate, mathematically. So any holding company, every subsidiary company, or your associate company, we know what is a holding company. We know what a subsidiary company is. We also know what an associate company is. Fellow subsidiary is if A has two subsidiaries, B and C, then B and C are fellow subsidiaries to each other. Where the parent happens to be a common, the subsidiaries are referred to as fellow subsidiaries. Now, an investing company or the venturer of the company. Now, this particular part was not there initially when the Companies Act 2013 came in. It was included subsequently. If I hold 25% shares in company B, if company A holds 25% shares in company B is associate of company A. So for company A, company B is the related party. But in the absence of this last part, for company B, despite the fact that company A was holding 25% share capital, it was still not regarded as a related party because this particular definition was not there under section 2, subsection 76. It was subsequently included to say that an investing company, which means any company which has put in more than 20% in the share capital of your company, I mean, by virtue of such holding, if you have become an associate, then that other company, the investing company also is your shareholder is also your related party. Similarly, if A and B together form a joint venture AB, then to AB, both A and B are related parties because they are the venture companies. They are the ones who are the venturers in the joint venture, right? Now, here I must tell you that this particular clause, any company which is a holding, subsidiary, associate, fellow subsidiary, investing company, or the venture company, for private limited companies, by way of an exemption notification, this particular clause has been exempted, and a holding company, a subsidiary company, or an associate company, or a fellow subsidiary, or an investing company, or the venture company is not a related party to a private limited company. So for a private limited company, its holding company is not related party for the purposes of section 188, only for the purposes of section 188. For disclosure requirements under accounting standards, it may be a very much a related party. But for compliance purposes, for compliance of section 188, it's not a related party. This particular clause has been exempted in respect of section 188 for private limited companies. And then you have the residuary clause, and taking help of that residuary clause, they have said a director other than an independent director or KMP of the parent company, of the holding company, or is relative. Now, if your holding company is your related party, but the directors of your holding company were not included in the definition as your related parties. The KMPs of your holding companies were not included as related parties of the subsidiary. So they now have, by virtue of these rules, they have also included directors or KMPs of the parent company and their relatives also as related parties. So this is the definition of related party under section 2, subsection 76. And as you can see, the definition is very wide, the definition is very complex, and it includes several persons and entities in its ambit. Compilation of this entire list for the reporting entity is really going to be a bit nightmare. Because unless you know who a related party is, how will you know what compliances you are required to make? You will not even know that a transaction has happened with a related party, and you have not done any compliance, and the transaction happens, and at the end of the year, you come to know about such transaction, and then you are at absolute loss to really understand as to how you will comply with the provisions. Now, as I said, the exemption notification of 5th June 2015 has exempted this clause number 8 with respect to section 188 to private limited companies. Now, some important issues, as you can see. LLP, as I said, a limited liability partnership. A limited liability partnership is not covered by section 2, subsection 76. Nowhere an LLP is covered. So even if you happen to be a significant partner of even if you happen to be a partner in LLP, unfortunately, Section 2, subsection 76, as it stands today, does not include LLPs within the definition of related parties. This is a technical, I would say, lapse. Very soon they should clarify this, and maybe they will clarify this, and even partners, I mean, where any director or relative is a partner in an LLP will also be included. But since as they stand today, for compliance purposes, for purposes of the Companies Act, under Section 2, subsection 76, if the entity happens to be, or if any director of entity happens to be a partner in an LLP, those LLPs are not treated as related parties. Similarly, your director is your relative. Your director of your holding company is your relative, but director of your subsidiary or director of your associate company is not your related party. Similarly, KMP of your company, KMP of your parent company, their relatives, they are related parties. But KMPs of your subsidiaries or KMPs of your associate companies and their relatives are not your related parties as far as Section 2, subsection 76 is concerned. Similarly, if your company has 2 associates, those 2 associates are not related parties to each other. Say company A has invested 25% in company B, has share capital to the extent of 40% of company D. Company B and company D are not related parties to each other. Similarly, if your subsidiary has an associate, if your subsidiary has invested 20%, that associate does not become a related party to the holding company. He is not holding company's associate, he is subsidiary's associate, and such relations are not captured under Section 2, subsection 76 of the Companies Act. Now, these exceptions will become relevant. As you see, these exceptions will really become relevant. I don't have to tell you that the definition of the term relative is very, very narrow as far as the Companies Act are concerned. All members of HUF, spouses, and father, mother, son, son's wife, daughter, daughter's husband, brother and sister, even steps are included. All they are relative, only they are relatives for the purposes of the Companies Act, for the purposes of understanding Section 2, subsection 76. Any other relation is not relevant as far as Section 2, subsection 76 or the provisions of the Companies Act are concerned, right? Now, how is a related party defined under the listing regulations? The listing obligations and disclosure requirement, which are commonly referred to as LODR, I will call them as listing regulations as we discuss. They have definition of related party under Regulation 2, subclause ZB, and it says related party means a related party as defined under Section 2, subsection 76 of the Companies Act or under the applicable accounting standards. So they have a very smart definition. Whether you are a related party as per accounting standards, whether you are a related party as per the Companies Act, these are the only 2 places when LODR was formed. These were the only 2 places where related party was defined. So they said whether you are defined here, whether you are defined here, as far as LODR is concerned, wherever you might be defined, related party would mean Section 2, subsection 76 plus applicable accounting standard. Now, since we are talking about listed entity, now the only applicable accounting standard is Ind AS 24. As on today, for all listed companies, Ind AS 24 has to be complied with. For all unlisted companies which have a net worth of 250 crores or more, Ind AS 24 has to be complied with. Only when an entity happens to be having, unlisted entity happens to be having net worth of less than 250 crores, it need not comply with Ind AS and it can comply with Accounting Standard 18. But since the definition under 2ZB is relevant only for listed entities, we can shorten the definition by saying related party means a related party as defined under section 2 subsection 76 of the Companies Act plus related parties as defined under Ind AS 24. That's it. AS 18 is not relevant as far as listed entities. But I think it is important for us to understand what related party relationships are there under the under Accounting Standard 18 before we proceed to understand related party relationships under Ind AS 24. Right? Now, as per AS 18, para 3 defines 5 kinds of related party relationships. 3A says that enterprises that directly or indirectly through one or more intermediaries control or are controlled by or are under common control with the reporting entity. Now, control means a parent-subsidiary relationship. When you say you are controlling a particular company, which means you are the holding company and the other company is your subsidiary. Control through one or more intermediaries have again been defined in Accounting Standard itself to mean as subsidiaries. So either you directly control an entity or through your subsidiaries you control, which means your step down subsidiaries, they are also your related parties as defined under 3A. So your subsidiary is your related party, your step down subsidiary is your related party, right? Associates and joint and companies which are under common control with the reporting entity. So even fellow subsidiaries are related parties to each other. Companies which are controlled by, which means your holding company is also your related party. So holding, subsidiary, fellow subsidiaries, they are all covered by clause para 3A of AS 18. 3B, associates and joint ventures of the reporting enterprise and the investing company and the investing company and venturer in respect of which the reporting enterprise is an associate are joint. So your associate is your related party. If you have formed a joint venture, that joint venture is your related party. To that associate, you are the investing company. So if you happen to be an associate of somebody, then that your investing company is also your related party. If you happen to be the joint venture company, then your venturer is also your related party. So your holding company, subsidiary, fellow subsidiary, associate, joint venture, investing company, venturer, they are all related parties to the reporting enterprise. Now comes the individuals. Individuals owning directly or indirectly an interest in the voting power of the reporting enterprise that gives them control or significant influence over the enterprise and relatives of such individuals. Again, mathematically understanding, control would mean shareholding of more than 50%. Significant influence would mean shareholding of, voting power of more than 20%. Such shareholding that would give you voting power of 20% or more. Now, if you happen to be controlling 50% of the voting power of a particular enterprise, you are said to be in control of that enterprise and you are a related party to that enterprise. Similarly, if you are in a position to exercise 20% or more voting power in respect of a particular enterprise, if you are such a significant shareholder, then even then you are a related party to that particular entity and your relatives also happen to be related parties to that particular entity. Right. If you happen to be a KMP, now KMP has been defined to mean persons in accordance with whose either the managing director or the whole-time director or persons in accordance with whom the board, whose instructions or directions the board is accustomed to act. So a non-executive director is not a TMP. Only a whole-time director, a managing director, or maybe such directors who are in a position to control that particular company because the company or the board is acting as per their instructions, their directions, which means promoters. So managing directors, whole-time directors or promoters can be referred to as TMPs and their relatives. But a director simpliciter, a non-executive director who is neither a managing director, nor a whole-time director, nor a promoter, he will not fall within the definition of TMP, and he will not be treated as a related party as per AS 18. Please see this. As per Companies Act, every director is a related party. But as per AS 18, every director is not a related party. Some directors may not be your related parties because they are not TMCs in your organization. Now, if these individuals who are holding 20% or who are in a position to exercise significant influence, or the TMPs as defined in para 3D, if they are able to exercise significant influence over any other third company, suppose Mr. A is holding 30% shares in company B. So for company B, Mr. A is a related party. Now Mr. A also holds 40% share in company C. Since it is an enterprise over which Mr. A is in a position to exercise significant influence, this company B and company C will also be related parties to each other. As I told you under section 2 subsection 76, this relationship is not captured. But under Accounting Standard 18, even all those enterprises where a particular shareholder is in a position to exercise significant influence, all those enterprises will become related parties to each other, right? Similarly, if a TMP of a particular company is in a position, I am a managing director of company A, but I am also a shareholder of company C, where I am holding more than 20%, where I am in a position to exercise more than 20% voting shares. Then in such cases, this company and that company will become related parties because I am a TMP here and I am exercising significant influence there. This is what related party relationships are defined under AS 18. Now see the interesting part. Every director is not a related party. All those entities where one particular person is in a position to exercise significant influence, then those entities inter se become related parties to each other. These are some of the related party relationships which are captured by Accounting Standard 18, but which are not captured by section 2 subsection 76 of the Companies Act. Similarly, there are certain relationships. If I happen to be a shareholder, if I happen to be a director in a private limited company, simply a director in a private limited company, that private limited company becomes my related party as per section 2 subsection 76, but that does not become my related party as per Accounting Standard 18. So for disclosure purposes in the financial statement, the definition as given in AS 18 is relevant. But for compliance under the provisions of the Companies Act, the definition as given in section 2 subsection 76 becomes relevant if you are not a listed entity. Right. As I said, a shareholder, irrespective of his shareholding, I mean, major shareholders, a non-executive director or a director simpliciter is not a related party under AS 18, but he is a related party under the Companies Act. The definition of relative as per AS 18 means spouse, son, daughter, brothers, sister, father, and mother. Son's wife or daughter's husband is not included as relatives as far as Accounting Standard 18 is concerned, but it's included as relatives as far as section 2 subsection 76 is concerned. These subtle differences, friends, you need to really, really understand. Because when you are disclosing related party transactions in accordance with accounting standard in the financial statement, you are guided by the accounting standard. You are not guided by section 2 subsection 76 of the Act. But when you are compliant with the provisions of the Companies Act as far as related party transactions are concerned, you are guided by section 2 subsection 76, and you have to ensure that compliances. So there may be a related party transaction as per the Companies Act, but it may not be a related party transaction which is required to be disclosed in accordance with accounting standard. Now, let us understand Ind AS 24. This is relevant because for listed entities, all relationships, even under Ind AS 24, are taken as related party relationships. Now, Ind AS 24 defines related party relationships as any person or his close member, if he has control or joint control over the reporting enterprise, then such person or his close member is a related party to the is a related party to that reporting enterprise. Control, though the definition of control is a person having the ability to effect variable returns through his rights over, through his power over the investing company. So the power that I have over the company only comes through my shareholding or my voting rights in a particular company. Only when I have those voting rights in a particular company, normally. Otherwise, you can also have power by virtue of certain agreements, but normally such power comes through. Is somebody doing this something? Right. So normally, if such power comes through your shareholding interest in a particular company, and if you are controlling a particular company, which means you are holding 50% or more voting power in that particular company. Vishnu, I think somebody is trying to do something with the screen, and
Sir, just hold on.
Okay,
Just
I'm
hold on.
looking up.
No,
We are
just hold on.
removing, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we're taking care.
Yeah. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. So this control, which means if you are in a position to exercise more than 50% or more than 50% voting power over a particular entity, then you are said to be in control of that particular entity. Similar, and such person or his close member then becomes a related party to that particular entity. Similarly, if a person or his close member is in a position to exercise significant influence. Now again, significant influence has been defined as the power to participate in the financial and operating policy decisions of an entity. Now this is very wide. A power to participate in the mere power to participate in the financial and operating policy decisions of an entity may come by way of an agreement. They may come by way of certain clauses contained in the articles of a particular company. But let us not complicate today. Let us understand very, very clearly. Let us only mathematically understand what does significant influence mean. Because in majority of the 99% of the cases, this mathematical definition would be relevant for our purpose. Mathematically understood, if you are in a position to exercise 20% or more voting power in relation to a particular entity, then you are said to be exercising significant influence over that particular reporting entity. So any person or his close member, if he is holding 20% or more voting power of a particular entity, then they are related parties to that particular entity. Now, if you are a KMP of a reporting entity or of its parent, which means of its holding company. Now, KMP again has been defined as persons who have the authority and responsibility for directing and controlling the activities of the company. Now, it may be and it includes any director, executive or otherwise. So any director, if he has the authority or responsibility for directing and controlling the activities of a company, then such person will also be taken as TM. And such person also will be treated as your related party. But again, understood in simple terms, your managing director, your whole-time directors, maybe your CFOs, if they are people who have the authority and responsibility for directing and controlling activities, and even your promoters. They are persons, because if a company acts as per their instructions or directions, then and if it can be established that yes, this particular company is acting as per their instructions or directions, then even they can be referred to as TM. But simplistically understood, the whole-time directors, the managing directors, the CFOs, they are referred to as the persons, they are referred to as TMPs. So TMPs of a particular reporting enterprise, similarly parent of a particular reporting enterprise, they are also taken as related party as far as Ind AS 24 is concerned. This is individual relationships. Now look at entity-based relationships. These are various entity-based relationships which have been defined in Ind AS 24. Entity and reporting entity are members of the same group. One entity is an associate or joint venture of the other entity. Both entities are joint venture of the same party. One entity is a joint venture of a third party and the other entity is an associate. Entity is a post-employment plan. Entity is controlled or jointly controlled by a person who has control or joint control. A person identified in A1 has significant influence over the entity, blah, blah, blah. Let us understand what do these relationships mean. The first one, 9B1. This is 9B1, the first one. What does it mean? Entity and reporting entity are members of the same group. So if there is a reporting entity, then its holding company, the same group is defined to mean parent, subsidiary, and fellow subsidiary. So the reporting entity, the holding company is the related party. The subsidiary is the related party. The fellow subsidiary is a related party. And all these four together constitute a group. For the holding company, the reporting entity happens to be a subsidiary, so it's a related party. The subsidiary is a step-down subsidiary for holding company, so it's a subsidiary, so it's a related party. The fellow subsidiary of this company is the direct subsidiary of the holding company, so this is also a related party. Similarly, for the subsidiary of the reporting entity, the holding company's holding company happens to be the holding company, and these subsidiaries, they happen to be fellow subsidiaries. So all these four are related parties to each other. Whether you take subsidiary as the reporting entity, whether you take fellow subsidiary as the reporting entity, whether you take holding company as the reporting entity, or whether you take reporting entity itself, as shown in the diagram, all the four are related parties to each other, right? Then one entity is an associate or joint venture of the other entity. One entity is an associate or joint venture of the other entity, or an associate or joint venture of a member of a group of which the other entity is a member. Finally, see this diagram very carefully. Let us call reporting entity as company A. Company A has a holding company. Company A has a subsidiary. Company A also has a fellow subsidiary. Company A has an associate or JV. The holding company also separately have another associate or JV. Now let us look at the first part of the transaction. One entity is an associate or joint venture of the other entity. Now for the reporting entity, this associate or joint venture, this is a direct associate, so it is also a related party. The associate or joint venture of the reporting entity is a related party to the reporting entity. Or an associate or joint venture of a member of the group Subsidiary is a member of the group. Holding company is a member of the group. Fellow subsidiary is a member of the group. Even their associates happen to be related parties to the reporting entity. So if holding company has a separate associate, that also is a related party to the reporting entity. If a fellow subsidiary has a separate associate, that also is a related party to the reporting entity. I hope you are able to see the wide canvas within which all the related parties relationships are trying to be involved. Right? Let us see the next one. Both entities are joint venture of the same party, same third party. One entity is a joint venture of the third party and the other entity is an associate of the third party. Let us combine 3 and 4 together, 9B3 and 9B4 together. Let us understand what they are. The first is, both entities are joint venture of the same third party. Say the third party is a company A Limited. Now A Limited has a joint venture AX, A Limited has a joint venture AY. Even these two joint ventures, because they happen to be joint venture of the same third entity A Limited, they inter se also will be related parties. This relationship is not captured under section 2 subsection 76. Even AS 18 does not capture this relationship. Similarly, one entity is a joint venture and the other entity is an associate. Now this A Limited has a joint venture AX, it also has an associate. It's not a joint venture, it's an associate. That associate and that joint venture are also related parties to each other. So when the associate happens to be the reporting entity, it has to also include JV as its related party. And if the JV happens to be the reporting entity, it also has to include the associate of its venture company as its related party. I hope you are clear. So how complex Ind AS has become, and it is trying to cover almost every kind of relationships between entities as related party relationships. Next one is the entity is a post-employment benefit plan for the benefit of employees. I don't have to dwell much on it. Your any post-retirement benefit plan is a related party to that particular entity, to the reporting entity. The next one, the entity is controlled or jointly controlled by a person who has control or joint control over the reporting entity. Now, who has control? Persons specified in clause A1. Persons who are in control or joint control over reporting enterprise. Control or joint control, mathematically understood, having more than 50% voting power in that particular entity. So the entity is controlled or jointly controlled by the person who has control or joint. I have, say, there is a person A. He has control over the reporting entity. This person also has control over A Limited. This person also has control over B Limited. Then reporting at the A Limited and B Limited also happen to be related parties of the reporting entity. So if I am in this is what even AS 18 said, that if I am in a position to exercise control over n number of companies, then those n number of companies inter se become related parties to each other. Right. Next two are important, just understand. A person identified in A1. Who is person identified in A1? Such person who has control or joint control over. Not A2 or A3. Not A2 or A3. Please be clear. Only when you are a person who has control. If such a person has significant influence over the entity or is a member of the TMP of the entity or of a parent of the entity, only then such entity becomes related party to the reporting entity. If you happen to be a person who is simply having significant influence in the reporting entity, and you also have significant influence over the other entity, then those entities don't become related parties. In respect of one entity, you should have control, and in respect of other entity, you should either have significant influence or you should be a KMP. I think pictorially you will understand it better. Right. This person A, he has control over the reporting entity. This person A also is also a KMP in this particular company. This person A has significant influence over A Limited and B Private Limited. Now, since as far as the reporting entity is concerned, this person A1 has significant influence, has control over this reporting entity, and then the same person is exercising significant influence over A Limited. He is exercising significant influence over B Private Limited. He is the KMP of the holding company of B Private Limited. Then all these companies become related parties to the reporting entity. Now, instead of person A being in control of the reporting entity, suppose person A only had significant influence in the reporting entity, then this relationship would not have mattered. Then it would not have resulted in related party relationship. For the reporting entity, you should be such person who is in control over the reporting entity. Only then, if you have significant influence over other entity, only then if you are a KMP of other entity, then those other entities become your related parties. Clear? This is how related party relationships are defined under Ind AS 24. There are certain exemptions which says that merely because your directors happen to be common in two different entities doesn't mean that those two entities become related parties to each other. Mere commonality of directorship will not lead to a conclusion that two entities are related parties to each other. Similarly, because KMP of one entity has significant influence over the other entity. I've just shown you in the diagram. This significant influence over the other entity only will work if you are in control of the reporting entity. If you are merely having significant influence, if you are merely is KMP of the reporting entity, then even if you have significant influence over other entities, those other entities will not become your related parties. Similarly, merely because two people come together and form a joint venture, those two people inter se do not become related parties. If Tatas and Birlas come together to form a Tata Birla joint venture, Tatas and Birlas per se don't become related parties to each other. To the joint venture, both Tatas and Birlas will be related parties. But inter se Tatas and Birlas, they don't become related parties to each other. This is what the definition of a related party is under Ind AS 24. I don't have to go through the definition of related parties under the IBC code. It's not relevant, and I think I'll be running short of time. So I'll skip this definition. Let us now understand what are related party transactions. We have now understood who is a related party, who is a related party as per section 2, subsection 76, who is a related party as per AS 18, who is a related party as per Ind AS 24, who is a related party as per section 2, subsection ZV of the LODR. Now let us understand what are related party transactions. Companies Act covers only these transactions as related party transactions. So for compliance under the Companies Act, under section 188, only these transactions are referred as related party transactions. Sale, purchase or supply of any goods or materials, selling, buying property of any kind, leasing of property of any kind, availing or rendering of any services, appointment of an agent for purchase or sale of any goods, materials, services or property, appointment to any office or place of profit, underwriting of securities. These are the transactions which have been captured as related party transactions under the Companies Act. Any transaction other than these is not a related party transaction as far as Companies Act is concerned. They may be related party transaction as far as accounting standards are concerned or as far as LODR is concerned. So in case of listed companies, though it may not be a related party transaction under the Companies Act, but if you look at the definition of related party transaction as per LODR, section 2, regulation 2, subclause ZC, which says transfer of resources, services, or obligations between the reporting entity and another entity. So whatever be the nature of the transaction, Companies have defined certain transactions, here, irrespective of whatever be the nature of the transaction, if there is a transfer of resource, if there is a transfer of service, if there is a transfer of any obligation between the reporting entity and another entity, regardless of the fact whether price is charged or not, such transaction will be treated as related party transactions. So for listed entities, the definition of related party is very wide. The definition of related party transaction is also very wide. But for entities which are not listed and which don't have to comply with LODR, the definition of related party is also limited only to section 2, subsection 76 of the Companies Act, and the compliance is also limited to primarily to section 188 of the Companies Act. There may be other sections also that you need to comply. In the similar fashion, AS 18 and Ind AS 24 also define related party transactions as. Now, one important thing that you need to notice is 188, what does it say? Specified contracts between a company and a related party. So the transaction should be between the reporting entity and its related party. Please understand this very carefully. Similarly, the transfer of resource has to be between the reporting entity and the other entity which is its related party. Now if the transfer is between the reporting entity if the transaction is between the reporting entity and a related party of its subsidiary, which is not a related party of the reporting entity, then such transactions are not covered as related party transactions. Similarly, if the transaction is entered by the subsidiary, not by the reporting entity, but by its subsidiary, and that transaction is entered with the relating party of the reporting entity, I am company X, A and B are my related parties. My subsidiary enters into transactions with those A and B who are my related parties. I don't have to do any compliance because I have not entered into any transaction. What 188 or what accounting standard or what LODR today covers is a transaction between the reporting entity and the related party. But where the transaction is between, say, subsidiary of the reporting entity with the related party of the reporting entity, those transactions are not required to be disclosed, are not required to be dealt with by the reporting entity. Similarly, if the transaction is by the reporting entity, but not with its related party, but with a related party of the subsidiary, which is not related party to the reporting entity, those transactions are also not required to be reported by the reporting entity as related party. This particular deficiency has already been noticed by the regulators. As we proceed further, I'll tell you that the regulators are very much aware of this particular deficiency, and they are now coming out with the provisions to even take care of these deficiencies. But before we proceed further, just I want to tell you that as per Ind AS 24, these are illustrative examples of related party transactions which are given in Ind AS 24. Purchase or sale of goods, purchase or sale of property, rendering, leases. Until now, it is same as Companies Act. Now, transfer of research and development, transfers under license agreements, transfers under finances arrangements, collateral or guarantees, these are not there under the Companies Act under Section 188. Commitments to do something if a particular event occurs or does not occur in future, settlement on behalf of liabilities on behalf of an entity, management contracts including deputation. As you can see, the list is much, much wider, and this is only an illustrative list. The actual definition happens to be transfer of resources or obligations between related parties, regardless of whether price is charged or not. Right? Now let us we have understood who are related parties. We have understood what is the status of what is a related party transaction. Now it is very, very important to understand, before we really apply the law, it is very important for us to understand what is the status of my company. Am I a public company or am I a private company? Even if I am a public company, am I a listed company or am I an unlisted company? If I am an unlisted company, whether my paid up capital is equal to or more than 10 crores, whether my turnover is equal to or more than 100 crores, whether my borrowings are more than 50 crores, these will become very relevant for you to decide what compliance you need to do. Or I don't fall under any of these three categories of unlisted public companies. If a public company happens to have a paid up capital of 10 crores or more, or turnover of 10 crores or more, or borrowings of 50 crores or more, then their compliance level is slightly more than other unlisted public companies which don't fall under this category. Similarly, in case of listed entities, whether am I a listed entity which is listed on SME stock exchange, SME platform, whether I am a listed entity whose paid up capital is 10 crores or less, or whose net worth is 25 crores or less. If I am a listed entity whose paid up capital is 10 crores or less, and both the conditions have to be satisfied, and net worth is 25 crores or less, or if I happen to be listed on the SME platform, then my compliance levels are lesser compared to listed entities which are neither on SME platform nor have paid up capital of 10 crores, less than 10 crores, and net worth of less than 25. So you have to really understand what is the status of your company, right? So having decided the status, now if you happen to be a listed company whose paid up capital is less than 10 crores or more and net worth is less than 25 crores or more, or if you happen to be listed only on SME platform, then please remember this entire regulation 23 of LODR, which deals with related party transactions, is not applicable to such listed companies. Don't think that you have to comply with the entire LODR as far as listed. Merely because I am a listed entity, I have to comply with the entire LODR. No, there are several listed entities, particularly in Calcutta, which don't have a paid up capital of 10 crores and a net worth of 25 crores. They don't have to comply with regulation 23, though they may have to comply with schedule 5A and clause 34.3 of the regulations, but not with the entire regulation 23. But if you are not such a small listed company, then the entire LODR is applicable to you. So whether you are a private company, whether you are an unlisted public company which does not have a paid up capital of 10 crores, turnover of 100 crores, borrowings of 50 crores, or whether you are such unlisted public company which has paid up capital of 10 crores or more, turnover, borrowings of the specified amount, whether you are a listed entity which does not have paid up capital of 10 crores and net worth of 25 crores, or whether you are a large listed entity. Depending on what your status is, your compliance level will be determined. If you, let us read it from the below. I hope the slide is visible. Let us read it from the below. If you happen to be an unlisted public company or a private limited company, unlisted public company whose paid up capital is not more than 10 crores, turnover not more than 100 crores, and loans not more than 50 crores, more than or equal to 50 crores. Right? Then all that you have to comply with is only section 188 of the Companies Act. Now here one small difference between such type of unlisted public companies and private companies. In case of private companies, even section 188 need not be complied with reference to a holding company, a subsidiary company, an associate company, a joint venture company, a fellow subsidiary company, because I already told you that that particular definition, that particular limb of the definition of related party under section 2 subsection 76 is not applicable to private. So the private limited companies, least amount of compliance. You have to comply with section 188, but not when the transaction is with a subsidiary or with a holding or with an associate or with a fellow subsidiary. Unlisted public company, you have to comply with only section 188. There is no exemption for holding company, subsidiary or associate. All with respect to all related party relationships as given in section 2 subsection 76, section 188 has to be complied. If you are an unlisted public company which has paid up capital or turnover or borrowings of more than the specified limits, any one of them, then you also have to comply with section 177 in addition to section 188. All these companies are required to have audit committees. And you also have to comply with the requirements of section 177 besides complying with section 188. If you happen to be a listed public company which has a paid up capital of less than 10 crores and net worth of less than 25 crores, you have to comply with section 177 because section 177 is applicable to a listed company. All listed companies, here there is no exemption. You have to comply with section 188. You also have to comply with LODR, but the major provision of LODR, which is clause 23, is not applicable. Only clause 34 is applicable in your case. Same is the status if you are a listed company which happens to be listed only on the SME platform. If you are any other listed company, then the compliance level is the maximum. You have to comply with 177, you have to comply with 188, you have to comply with LODR provisions in totality. So based on the status of a company, you can decide, you can really understand what would be the compliance requirement in case such entity enters into a related party transaction with a related party. The definition of related party, the definition of related party transaction will also change depending on the nature of an entity. I hope I am clear. Right. Next, what compliance requirements am I supposed to do? Vishnu, how much more time do I have? 20 more minutes, 10-20 minutes?
Sir, you can continue for the next 15-20 minutes. Sir.
Okay.
After that, some questions there.
Yeah.
Yes,
that's fine. Now look at the compliance requirements. The compliance requirement, as I said, is under the Companies Act, their rules, as well as under the LODR regulations. As I said, first 177. What does 177 say? 177 deals with related audit committees. Now it says, in respect of all listed entities and in respect of all those unlisted public companies which have a paid up capital of more than 10 crores, turnover of 100 crores and borrowings of 50 crores, whatever be the limits, you have to take approval of all transactions of the company with related parties. Even you have to take approval in respect of every subsequent modification of such plan. So all transactions with related parties, please understand the difference. It is not approval in respect of related party transactions. The language doesn't say approval of related party transactions. The language says approval of all transactions of the company with related parties, all transactions. whatever transaction that you enter into with a related party, whether it is a section 188 transaction or whether it is not a section 188 transaction, you still have to take approval under section 177. So while a loan transaction will not come within the ambit of section 188, but a loan transaction will come within the ambit of section 177. So if A Limited enters into a transaction, loan transaction with its subsidiary, which is its related party, while it may not be required to take approval under section 188 because it is not a related party transaction under section 188, but it will still have to comply with section 177 because it is transaction with a related party. Irrespective of whether it is a related party or transaction or not, all transactions with related parties will require. I hope you are able to see the complexity. 177, irrespective of the nature, the moment the transaction is with a related party, the moment section 177 applies to you, you have to take approval of the audit. Now, there are provisions for omnibus approvals. I will not go into that. Now these second proviso, third proviso, fourth proviso, which you can see on the right side of the slide, they have been inserted subsequently. And they provide certain relaxation to this approval, this requirement of taking approval of the audit committee. Second proviso says that in case of transactions other than transactions referred to in section 188. What are transactions other than those referred to in section 188? Basically, they are financial transactions, loan transactions, guarantee transactions, security transactions. Those transactions, they don't fall under section 188. All those transactions, it says that if the committee does not approve the transactions, it will have to make its recommendation to the board. Prior to the insertion of this particular proviso, it was understood that audit committee approval is must. There is nothing beyond. If the audit committee says no, it is a no. You can't enter into such transactions. But they have carved out a slight exception in respect of non-section 188 transactions, in respect of loan transactions. And they said that if audit committee does not approve, it then make its recommendation to the board, and then board may finally decide whether it want to enter into such a transaction or not. So in respect of non-section 188 transaction, audit committee's approval is not, you have to go through the audit committee, but audit committee's approval may not be necessary. Audit committee may not agree to such transaction, but then its recommendation can be made to the board and the board may take it. But in respect of 188 transaction, you don't have such exceptions. Either the audit committee has to approve, and if it doesn't approve, then you can't enter into such a transaction. Right. Similarly, in case of transactions where the amount does not exceed 1 crore of rupees entered by a director without obtaining the approval of the audit committee, and the same is not ratified. Previously, it was clearly understood that the approval of the audit committee is a prior approval and it has to be taken. Unless there is an approval granted by the audit committee, you cannot enter into such transactions or not. But this third proviso gives an indication that if the value of the transaction is less than 1 crore of rupees, then in those cases, if you have not already taken approval of the audit committee, you can take such approval within 3 months. If you don't take such approval within 3 months, then of course the transaction is voidable at the option of the audit committee. Similarly, there is an exemption provided in respect of transactions between a holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary. Now, this transactions between holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary, I will deal a little later. I will try and show you as to how different provisions, different sections have differently worded this particular exemption with respect to holding company and a subsidiary. So audit committee section 177 says that if a transaction is between a holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary company, other than a transaction referred to in section 188, which means It also, the exemption is only in respect of non-section 188 transaction. It is not a omnibus exemption in respect of all transactions between holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary. It is only in respect of non-section 188 transactions other than section 188 transactions that they have provided this particular exemption. Right? If you look at section 188, section 188 says that yes, you cannot enter into a transaction except with the consent of the board of directors. Now this consent also has to be given at the meeting of the board of directors. It cannot be taken by circulation. And then they say that if the transaction, if the value of the transaction is of a specified amount, if the value of the transaction is of a specified amount, then you also need to take approval of shareholders by way of an ordinary resolution. Now, when you take approval of shareholders by an ordinary resolution, whether related parties will be allowed to vote or not, as far as section 188 is concerned, only those related parties which are party to that particular transactions, they will not be allowed to vote. But LODR, let me tell you, in case of listed company, has a different view as far as voting by related parties is concerned. We will come to that. 188, board's approval. If the value of the transaction is in excess of certain specified amount as given in the rules, shareholders approval. At the shareholders meeting, those related parties which are party to the transaction, they cannot vote. Others, they can vote. If the total number of members of a company constitutes more than 90% of related parties only, then everybody can vote, not an issue at all. Right? Now, if the transaction happens to be in your ordinary course of business and is at an arm's length basis, then no approval is required. So you don't need any approval at all if the transaction is in an ordinary course of business and is at an arm's length basis. Then section 88 does not apply. Section 188 subsection 1 does not apply at all. But let me warn you, in such cases, 177 is still applicable. Even if it is an arm's length transaction, because it is a transaction with a listed with a related party, 177 is still applicable. If section 177 is applicable to your company, then you will have to take approval under section 177, but you may not be required to take approval under section 188. Right? So what is the procedure? First, audit committee's approval, then board's approval. If the value of the transaction is of a specified amount, this amount is given here, 10% or more of the net worth of the company or turnover of the company. Majority cases, it is 10% or more of the turnover. Only in respect of selling or buying of property, it is 10% or more of the net worth. And in case of office or place of profit, it is amount exceeding 2.5 lakhs of rupees. Otherwise, you if the value of the transaction is of these amounts or more, then you will have to take shareholders approval. Now this rule says that no shareholders approval will be necessary for transactions entered into between a holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary whose accounts are consolidated with such holding company and placed before the shareholders at the general meeting. There is no exemption between holding and wholly owned subsidiary transaction from taking board's approval. Board's approval is needed only in respect of shareholders' approval. If the accounts happen to be consolidated, then shareholders' approval is not needed. As I said, with respect to holding and subsidiary, I will take it separately. You will see it in 2 minutes' time as to what different provisions contain different prescriptions with respect to holding and wholly owned subsidiary transactions. Under LODR, audit committee in respect of listed entities which do not have a paid up capital of 10 crores or more and net worth of 25 crores or less, in respect of all those entities, all related party transactions will require prior approval. Here also there is a provision for omnibus approval. If time permits, we will go into omnibus approval. Otherwise, we will not go into omnibus approval. There is no specific provision which says that you will have to take board's approval. But since all listed entities are also public companies, they in any case under section 188 they will have to take board's approval. And even LODR says that it is key function of the board to monitor and manage potential conflict interests, including abuse of RPTs. So definitely it is the responsibility of the board to not only approve those transactions, but also to manage and monitor those transactions. As far as shareholders are concerned, approval of shareholders is concerned, LODR says that all material related party transactions will require approval of shareholders. Now, what is a material related party transactions? If the transaction already entered, together with the transaction to be entered during the particular financial year, if it exceeds 10% or more of the annual consolidated turnover of that particular entity as per its last audited financial statements, then those transactions will be considered material. And in such cases, all related party transactions will also require approval from shareholders. Unfortunately, LODR doesn't talk of prior approval of shareholders. Companies Act doesn't talk of prior approval of audit committee. LODR says prior approval of audit committee. Companies Act says prior approval of shareholders. LODR doesn't say prior approval of shareholders. But in any case, it would mean prior approval of the shareholders because unless you take approval of the shareholders, you will not be in a position to enter into such transactions. And LODR also says that no related party will be allowed to vote. Whether such related party is a party to that transaction or not, no related party of a company will be allowed to vote on any related party transaction. If the transaction is with an X related party, all other related parties to the company, they also will not be allowed to vote on that particular transaction. So related parties are in Companies Act, only those related parties which are party to the particular transaction, related to that transaction, even only they will not be allowed to vote, but others will be allowed. LODR also provides exemptions for transactions entered into between holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary. Interestingly, LODR gives complete exemption from audit committee requirement, exemption from board requirement, exemption from shareholder requirement, provided the transaction is between holding and wholly owned subsidiary. But Companies Act does not give such exemption. So while you may be exempted under LODR, you still will have to comply with the provisions of the Companies Act, even if the transaction is between holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary. So omnibus approval, I'm skipping for the time being. What other provisions are contained in LODR? LODR also talks of a related party policy. I am not dealing with it because since majority of the audience here would be chartered accountants who may not really be interested in knowing what a related party transactions policy is. So I'll skip that and I'll quickly come to the holding subsidiary. As I said, in case of private companies, the subsidiary company is not even your related party. So that's it. As far as 177 is concerned, audit committee is not approval. Audit committee approval is not necessary only in respect of non-section 188 transactions between holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary. Which means in respect of loan transactions, guarantee transactions, 188 approval is not needed if it's a transaction between holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary. Other transactions will require approval under 177. Contrast it with LODR, which says no approval is needed. So when you are a listed company, while under LODR you don't need an audit committee's approval if it is a transaction for sale, but under 177(4) subclause 4, you will still need an audit committee's approval. So be very careful. You have to be very clear as to what each provision says, and you will have to apply. Merely because you are a listed entity, merely the transaction is between a holding and a wholly owned subsidiary, nothing is applicable to me, no audit committee, no board, nothing, I don't have to do anything. Please don't do that. Please see section 177. It does not give you any exemption. It gives exemption only in respect of non-section 188 transaction. If it is a section 188 transaction, then you will need audit committees. They are trying to synchronize. They are a lot of dissimilarities have been removed. Slowly they are trying to synchronize. Until they synchronize, you will have to understand these
सिंक्रोनाइज कर देगा तो बिजी हो जाएगा.
somebody is speaking in between. I understand. Yeah. So if until they are able to synchronize, you have to be very, very clear about what each particular provision says. 188.1, fifth proviso to section. Shareholders' resolution is not necessary for transactions entered into between holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary. See, what does the section says? Section says that you don't need shareholders' approval if the transaction is between the holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary. But there is one condition, and that condition is that the accounts of the subsidiary company have to be consolidated with the holding company, and they have to be placed before the shareholders of the holding company for its approval. If this condition is satisfied, then you don't need any approval in respect of transactions between holding company and its wholly owned subsidiary. But then in the rules, there is an explanation which says, in case of wholly owned subsidiary, the resolution is passed by the holding company will be sufficient for the purposes of entering into transactions between the wholly owned subsidiary and the holding company. Now, how is this relevant? When the section says that if I am complying with this requirement of presenting the consolidated accounts, nothing applies to me. Where is the question of passing of a resolution by the holding company, that being sufficient compliance under section 11? To read both of them harmoniously, the only construction that I can draw is that if you don't happen to comply with the condition, in other words, if you are not consolidating the accounts, and if you are not placing the consolidated accounts before the shareholders for approval, then in such cases, this exemption under fifth proviso to 188.1 will not be applicable to you. You can take shelter of the rules, and only if holding company passes resolution in such case, it will be sufficient. The subsidiary need not pass through take the trouble of passing resolution. As I already said, LODR, everything is exempt, but the condition is that the accounts have to be consolidated and they have to be placed before the shareholders. Simple provision, a single line would have been sufficient, exempting transactions between holding and wholly owned subsidiary. But if you look at each different provision, there are complexities added. 177 is different, 188.1 is different, Rule 15 is different, Regulation 23(5)B is different. None of the four are similar in their approach towards holding and wholly owned subsidiary transactions. The Institute of Company Secretaries of India has come out with a guidance note. While it is not possible for me to take you through the entire guidance note, but then there are certain important issues which I need to highlight. The Institute has given a view that in case of preferential allotment, although the transaction is with a related party, the same is not a related party transaction, which means allotment of shares is not a related party transaction. That is the view that has been taken by the Institute of Company Secretaries of India in its guidance note. Similarly, they have said that a leave and license agreement is not treated as equivalent to leasing, because a license agreement creates only limited rights. So it will not be a transaction with a limited party. It will not be a related party transaction. However, since the transaction is with a related party, 177 has to be complied with. If you look at this particular definition in light of Ind AS 24, this is not relevant, because Ind AS 24 clearly says that even license agreements are covered within the ambit of Ind AS 24. Shares, allotment of shares, because shares, they don't become goods until they are allotted. So subscription to shares will not be a related party transaction, because there are no goods existent on the date of allotment of the shares. It is only after allotment that the shares become goods. So they will not fall within the purview of 188. However, transfer, because transfer is of an existing share, which is transfer of goods. So transfers will be a related party transactions, but allotment will not be a related party transaction. Similarly, there are certain other guidance that has been given by the Institute of Company Secretaries of India. One important aspect, one important guidance that they have given is that appointment of a managing director. This is a contract of service. This is not a contract for service, and a managing director will be paid such remuneration which he is entitled to as a director of the company, which again is exempt by virtue of explanation to section 188. They have also given a guidance that such appointment also will not be treated as a related party transaction. Disclosure requirements under the Companies Act, section 188 says that every contractor arrangement has to be disclosed in the board's report. Now, this, you remember this AOC 2 or whatever it is, under section 129, you are given disclosure of all those related party transactions in AOC 2. This AOC 2 is compliance of section 129 as well as compliance of section 188 subsection 2. Though in AOC 2, the word material is used, though the word material is not defined anywhere in the Companies Act, we will borrow the definition of materiality from the LODR. And since for the last 6-7 years, I mean, almost we have been filling up AOC 2, so we know what are the contents of AOC 2 and what disclosures that are required to be made under AOC 2. So I'll not deal in detail as far as disclosures under section 188.2 or section 129. 129 says financial statements has to comply with accounting standards. Now, this is a disclosure in the financial statements. I started my presentation by saying we are not discussing the manner in which disclosure is required to be made in the financial statements. I repeat, disclosure in financial statement is completely guided by accounting standards. Today, we are discussing only the compliance requirements, not the accounting requirements, not the disclosure requirements in financial statements as are presented by the accounting standards, right? Similarly, 134 subsection 3 says that board report will have to include particulars of all the contracts or arrangements with related parties referred to in section 188. Rule 15 says that where any director is interested in any contract, then such director will not be present at the meeting. This is also a requirement of section 184, whether rule says it or not. Wherever there is any conflict of interest, wherever a director is interested in a particular transaction, is not required to be a part of the discussions with respect to that particular transaction. If the transaction has to be taken to the shareholders for their voting, then the agenda of the board meeting which approves related party transaction, they have to, I mean, such disclosures have to be made in agenda of the board meeting. Similarly, explanatory statement with respect to the general meeting resolution, there are certain defined disclosures under Rule 15 which are required to be made. This is very relevant for secretarial audit and people, for company secretaries in particular. They have to be very, very careful that if they have taken any RPT approval, then the notice of the board meeting as well as the notice of the general meeting, they have to ensure that these disclosures as are required under Rule 15.1 and 15.3 are there in the agenda as well as in the explanatory statement. Similarly, there are different disclosure requirements under the listing regulations. You have to give disclosures as required under para A of Schedule 5 in the annual report. This disclosure requirement under para A of Schedule 5 is required to be given in compliance with with Regulation 34.3, and this is applicable to all listed companies, irrespective of whether you are SME listed or whether you are having a paid up capital of 10 crores and net worth of 25 crores less than that. Irrespective of that, you still have to give all that information that is required to be given in accordance with para A of Schedule 5. As far as para C of Schedule 5 is concerned, it is only in respect of other listed companies, which is basically your corporate governance report should disclose significant related party transactions that may have potential conflict with the interest of the entity at large. And you also will have to give disclosure of the web link where the related party policy of the company has been displayed. So similarly, one very important disclosure that is required to be given by listed entities is in terms of Regulation 23 subclause 9, which says within 30 days from the date of publication of standalone or consolidated financial results, related party transactions on a consolidated basis in the format specified by the relevant accounting standards for annual results shall also be disclosed, and they also should be published on the website of the company. So your financial disclosures of accounting standards on a quarterly basis, on a half-yearly basis, also is required to be given to stock exchanges under Regulation 23(9) by the listed entities. Finally, I told you that there are certain listed party transactions which are not entered by the reporting entity, but which are entered by the subsidiary of the reporting entity, by the related party of the reporting entity, particularly by the subsidiary of the reporting entity. The holding company in respect of such transactions is not required to do any compliance. Similarly, if the holding company enters into a transaction with a related party of the subsidiary, then it is not required to do any such transaction, any such compliance. Ramesh Srinivasan Working Group has come out with recommendations, and the definition of related party transaction is sought to be amended. And it is not only transactions between the company and its related party, but also transactions between the subsidiary of the company and the related party of the listed entity, or the listed entity and related parties of the subsidiaries. They are also sought to be covered. This is still not the law. SEBI has already come out with a discussion paper. That discussion paper is available for comments on the website of SEBI. But very soon, I am sure immediately, very soon, maybe within a period of next 2 to 3 weeks, this will become reality, or maybe because of the COVID problems or the lockdown problems which every company is facing, if they don't want to burden the companies with additional disclosures, they may wait for 2-3 more months. But this certainly is going to see the light of the day. Similarly, I told you shareholders' prior approval is not there in LODR. They are now seeking to amend and include the word prior in the LODR regulations as well, so that it becomes pari materia with the requirements of the Companies Act. So friends, this is the entire gamut of the compliance requirement in respect of related party transactions. I think I have already taken close to hours, and I think I should end by saying thank you. And if you have any questions on related party transactions, you are free to ask.
Thank you very much, sir. Wonderful deliberation, sir. I will, sir, Vishnu has a question for you. Vishnu, go ahead, please ask it.
Yeah.
Hello. Hello.
Vishnu, go ahead. Vishnu, we can hear you. Go ahead.
We have one question from Sweta Sonthalia from Mumbai. She is asking that कि ऐसा कोई actually वो बोले बहुत confused हो गए हैं, इतने सारे compliances से पता ही नहीं चल रहा कि हम कहाँ पे हैं. तो खासकर कुछ ऐसे 2-4 एग्जांपल बताएं जिसमें कि कंप्लीट के साथ डिस्क्लोजर तो है लेकिन कंप्लायंस नहीं हो, या जहाँ कंप्लायंस और डिस्क्लोजर सो दैट कि इसको थोड़ा बेटर से समझ पाएं. ऐसे कोई एग्जांपल वो साइड करना चाह रही हैं. तो कैन यू हेल्प अस?
No, as I said, loan transactions for that matter. While loan transactions will be disclosed as related party transactions in case of unlisted public companies under the accounting standards.
Means 185, sir?
185 transactions.
Okay.
But then they don't need any compliance under section 188 for that.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So this is the only question I had received from the audience. Any other person can ask any question to the sir.
You also had a question, I think.
No, the same question I wanted to put here.
Sir, some people are asking whether this PPT will be available to them.
Yeah, I'll share the PPT with either you or Vishnu. You can forward it to your participants.
So, sir, once we receive the PPT from you, we will upload it on our website, vipca.in.
whatever is your mechanism, either you forward it or you upload it, whatever is your mechanism.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Right? So fine. That's
Uh,
all.
If
Rahul,
anyone has any other queries, please raise your hands. We will unmute you so that you can ask the question.
क्यों अब हो गया यार, अब और क्यों परेशान करते हो? 6 बज गए, समझ सकते हो।
Rahul, कौन संदीप?
Sandeep bhaiya, just give me 1 minute. Sandeep bhaiya, I have unmuted you.
Yeah,
Yes, please go ahead and offer a vote of thanks to sir.
yeah, I'm audible.
Yes, bhaiya,
Yeah.
you are.
Friends, on behalf of VIPCA, I would like to thank to CA Manoj Bhatia for such a wonderful revelation. He took the topic, which is very complex topic. Everyone has so much confusion, but the presentation was such a nice way, such a presentation, so that everyone, I think each and everyone we got benefited from this. Thank you very much for this. I would like to thank everyone for joining the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your time. With this, we'll call off the meeting. So thank you, sir. Have a nice day. Keep safe, sir. And wish everyone a good evening and keep safe, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.